In Module 2, the big takeaway that I had was first, we as teachers are many teachers are challenged because many teachers never learned how the brain functioned when the brain goes through the learning process. And this is a very significant problem because each and every day teachers are tasked with helping students how to learn. Incorporating universal development levels in a classroom can allow teachers and help them grow a specific student's level of knowledge. So why this impacted me was because as a teacher, I am really hopeful that I can reach or diversify my instruction to the point where I can reach each of my students. And so understanding these, how I how I can reach all of my students at their specific and varied points of development was fascinating for me, especially as I'm learning how to be the best possible teacher that I can be with my skill set. The quotes that stood out to me, Dr. Kurt Fisher's quote, where he talked about how as a child is developing, for each of their levels in skill, there's a growth pattern in the brain where the growth of networks move around the brain systematically. This quote inspired me because it kind of illustrated this interconnectedness that we have in our brains, and how students, when learning a new concept, will inevitably make connections with prior knowledge or make connections with make connections with what they know already. This has inspired me to the point because I want to, as a teacher, try to make my instruction relevant for each of my students. It's always been, when I learned the best was when I was passionate about something, or when a teacher went the extra mile to appeal to my passions in their classroom. And that's something that I also want to provide to my students. The other quote was also from Fisher, where he talked about that brain growth correlates with a level of cognitive growth in a child, and this is where neuroscience and education blends beautifully. So this further sort of elaborates on the point that if we're educating or working or making sure that our instructional practice is or follows the sort of the breakthroughs that we've had in neuroscience, this could allow us to have effective instruction or teach, basically make sure that our classrooms are vehicles of effective instruction to each of our students. The critical points that stood out to me through this was the dynamic skill theory that I saw that again that Dr. Fisher elaborated on through his data analysis, and also what Todd Rose talked about when he first sort of illustrated or outlined the sort of neurons that we have in our brain, and the how we each sort of have a specific neuron structure. What I liked about overall, what sort of made sense was how this sort of built from. So, while we all have neurons, each of us sort of learn new concepts differently. And so this to me went hand to hand to what Dr. Fisher ended up saying at the end of this module. Lastly, what I was left with was that this quote was that experience reshapes the brain, but it only does it when we are actively doing things. And as a teacher who is really driven to incorporate project-based learning into my classroom or inspire my students to basically pursue hands-on learning, this really encouraged me for the instruction that I have worked towards and the lesson plans that I have built over my last 4 years here at KU. All right, on the third module, transitioning to the third module, um, my big takeaway was that this module explored the responsibility that we all have as teachers, and also the challenge that we have to reach all of our students through the universal design of learning. The quotes that stood out was that the universal design for learning is designed to minimize barriers and maximize learning for all students. So I liked how this sort of explored the learner variability, or the variability that every student has. It's problematic when I think it's obviously problematic when people pursue a one-size-fits-all approach to education, because it's going to inevitably reach a lot of students who simply know how to play the game. And so what I've what I would, I've always been very eager to learn about how I can vary my instruction to make sure that every student in my classroom is getting the best learning experience possible. And so the UDL was really appealing to me, or learning more about universal design for learning was really appealing to me for that reason and many other reasons as well. Also, another quote was that the universal design for learning represents a paradigm shift in education that has the potential to improve outcomes for a broad range of learners. This was exciting for me to read. I think there was a video I used to watch when I went to a charter school. It was it was the video that I think all of my teachers sort of rallied around, where it talked about how there are a lot of traditional classrooms out there which have taught the same exact year for 27 straight years. And so reading about a paradigm shift in education itself, or a paradigm shift that's catching fire with a lot of teachers and a lot of classrooms throughout the country, is very exciting to me and makes me really thankful that I'm living in this time. So the critical points that I took away from this, I really like sort of breaking down the instructional planning process of UDL, because I think it allows me as a teacher to sort of have a better idea of what my goals are for my lesson plans, for my curriculums, and also what I'm hoping that my students get from my lesson plans and curriculums. So establishing clear outcomes from the get-go, I think, is really important, and outlining all of these steps. So anticipating learner variability. This is something that in my practicum, I was something that kind of went over my head, I guess, in my practicum, and something I didn't fully consider when I was designing my first tests and also designing my lesson plans in my practicum. Because the first thing I saw, while I was using, tools like Nearpod, was that there was some of my students who just weren't understanding the concepts. So being challenged to anticipate this variability early, I think, is incredibly important. Next, measuring, I think going through all the steps, measuring outcomes and assessment plans. This is great because it allows us challenging the teacher, or having the teacher set up clear checkpoints for each lesson plan, I think, is also very important, especially when we are in such a time when data collection and data analysis is really important for the things that we do, and also really sought after for what we are doing in the classroom as teachers. And finally, it challenges the teacher to reflect. So what went well? What would a teacher want to change? And also allows the teacher to fully, I think, analyze the instructional experience, and also more finely tune their units and lesson plans in the classroom. Anyway, those were modules 2 and 3, and thank you so much for your time today.